Some places are not meant for men. They are outposts of stone and wind, where the sea whispers secrets to the rocks and the sky watches with a cold, indifferent eye. For centuries, sailors navigating the treacherous waters of the Outer Hebrides of Scotland spoke of the Flannan Isles in hushed tones. They called them the Seven Hunters, a place of strange magnetism and deep-seated superstition. A place so unsettling that for generations, shepherds would only graze their sheep there during the day, refusing to spend a single night, believing the land itself was haunted. In 1899, a beacon of modernity was lit on the largest of these islands, Eilean Mor, a triumph of engineering designed to guide ships to safety. But in the winter of 1900, this symbol of light and reason would become the stage for one of the most profound and chilling maritime mysteries of all time. It would host a disappearance so complete, so devoid of clues that it defies all logical explanation. 3 men, tasked with keeping the light, vanished from a locked lighthouse on a remote island, leaving behind only a few cryptic clues and an eternal deafening silence. They were men of the sea, seasoned and steady. Thomas Marshall, the second assistant, was a 40-year-old with a family, a hardy man with decades of experience. James Ducat, the principal keeper, was 43, a husband and father of 4, known for his calm and reliable nature. The third was a last-minute replacement, an occasional keeper named Donald MacArthur. At 28, he was a tough, brawling Highlander with a reputation for a short fuse, a man you wouldn't want to cross. Together, they were left to man the lonely sentinel of Eilean Mor. Their isolation was absolute. The nearest inhabited land was the Isle of Lewis, over 20 miles away. Their only contact with the outside world was the scheduled arrival of the relief tender, the steamer Hesperus. That arrival was scheduled for December 20th, 1900, but a fierce storm delayed the ship. It wasn't until Boxing Day, December 26th, that Captain James Holman finally brought the Hesperus within sight of Eilean Mor. Immediately, something was wrong. The air was heavy with a sense of profound stillness. There was no flag flying from the mast, a standard greeting. The landing was empty. No one was there to welcome them or to catch the lines. Most unnerving of all, the great lamp, which should have been shining day and night, was dark. Captain Holman blew the ship's whistle and fired a signal flare. The sounds were swallowed by the wind. The lighthouse remained dark, silent and lifeless. A relief keeper, Joseph Moore, was sent ashore in a small boat. The journey itself was perilous, but the dread he felt was of a different kind. As he climbed the 160 steep stone steps carved into the cliffside, the eerie silence of the island pressed in on him. He would later describe an overwhelming feeling of a dreadful sense of apprehension. At the top, he found the main gate to the compound closed. The door to the lighthouse tower was also closed but unlocked. Moore pushed it open and stepped inside. The scene that greeted him was not one of violence or chaos, but of a life interrupted. A single overturned chair lay on its side next to the kitchen table, the only sign of any disturbance. On that table, a meal of salted mutton and pickles was laid out, completely untouched, as if the men had been about to sit down to eat when something happened. The clock on the wall had stopped. In the keeper's sleeping quarters, the beds were made and everything was neat and tidy. The great lamp itself was in perfect working order, cleaned and refilled with oil, ready to be lit. But it was the final details that etched the scene into the annals of the unexplained. Hanging by the door were 2 sets of heavy oilskins and sea boots. One set was missing, that belonging to Donald MacArthur. But the coats of Thomas Marshall and James Ducat were still there. It was unthinkable that 2 experienced keepers would venture out into the ferocious winter storms of the North Atlantic without their protective gear. Yet that is precisely what the evidence suggested. Two men had seemingly walked out into a tempest wearing only their thin woolen uniforms. But the most disturbing discovery was yet to be made. It was found in the lighthouse's official logbook. The entries were penned by Thomas Marshall. The first few days were routine, detailing weather conditions and daily chores. But on December 12th, the tone shifts dramatically.
12th December. Gale north by northwest. Sea lashed to fury. Never seen such a storm. Ducat quiet and irritable. MacArthur has been crying.
This entry is bizarre on multiple levels. First, there were no official reports of any storm in the area on December 12th, 13th, or 14th. The weather on the nearby Isle of Lewis was calm. Passing ships reported nothing of the sort. This storm appears to have existed only in the minds of the men on Eilean Mor. Second, the description of the men's behavior is deeply out of character. James Ducat was a veteran keeper, not a man to be easily rattled, and the image of Donald MacArthur, the hard-as-nails brawler, openly weeping is utterly confounding. What could possibly reduce these stoic men to such a state of terror? The log continues the next day.
13 December. Storm continued through night. Wind shifted west by north. Ducat quiet. MacArthur praying.
Again, this storm is a phantom unrecorded by any other source. The idea of all three men trapped inside a 75-foot stone tower praying in terror at a storm that didn't exist is chilling. And then, the final cryptic entry logged on December 15th.
15 December. Storm ended. Sea calm. God is over all.
After this entry, there is nothing. The log is blank. The work slates for the following days are clean. The men, their duties, their very existence, simply stop. The official investigation was led by Superintendent Robert Muirhead. He was the man who had recruited and knew all three keepers. He conducted a thorough search of the island. The only physical damage he found was on the western landing platform. A supply box had been smashed, its contents strewn about, and iron railings were bent and twisted out of shape. Muirhead formulated the official explanation, the one that stands in the history books today. He concluded that during a lull in the storm on the afternoon of the 15th, Marshall and Ducat had gone down to the western landing to secure the ropes and crane. He theorized that a gigantic, unexpected rogue wave, a wall of water perhaps over 100 feet high, surged up the cliff face and swept them away. Donald MacArthur, seeing his colleagues in peril, must have run out to help them, explaining why his coat was gone but the others were not, only to be taken by the same or a subsequent wave. It's a plausible, rational explanation, but it's riddled with holes. Lighthouse regulations expressly forbade all three keepers from leaving their post at the same time for any reason. Why would two of them venture down the treacherous steps during a storm without their protective oilskins? And if they were swept away, why were the gate and the main door to the lighthouse found closed behind them? Who closed them? The official story doesn't account for the untouched meal or the overturned chair, which suggest a sudden event inside the lighthouse. And most importantly, it fails to explain the terrifying logbook entries describing a phantom storm and the keeper's uncharacteristic, hysterical fear. If the official theory is the truth, it is a truth full of contradictions. And it's in those contradictions that darker theories take root. What if the danger wasn't outside, but locked inside the tower with them? Donald MacArthur was known for his violent temper. Could the intense, maddening isolation of Eilean Mor have pushed him over the edge? Perhaps a fight broke out. The overturned chair could be evidence of a sudden, violent struggle. In this scenario, MacArthur, in a fit of rage, murders Marshall and Ducat. He then carries their bodies down the 160 steps, casts them into the churning sea, and then, consumed by guilt and horror, throws himself in after them. It's a grim possibility, but it accounts for the strange clues inside the tower. Others have speculated about a more clandestine end. Could the men have been abducted? In the tense years leading up to the First World War, these remote islands were of strategic importance. Perhaps a foreign boat, maybe even an early submarine, landed on the island seeking information about shipping routes. The keepers, witnessing something they shouldn't have, were silenced and taken away. Their disappearance staged to look like an accident. It sounds like fiction, but it's a theory that has persisted. But to truly understand the mystery of Eilean Mor, one must look beyond the world of men and into the realm of folklore and the supernatural, a world the islanders of the Hebrides knew all too well. Eilean Mor was not a normal place. It was said to be imbued with an ancient, malevolent energy. For centuries, it was believed to be the home of the phantoms of the Seven Hunters, and it was considered deeply unlucky to spend the night there. Some believe the keepers fell victim to this ancient curse, driven mad by the island's spirit. This theory gains a chilling credibility when you consider the phantom storm in the logbook. What if the men weren't describing a storm of wind and rain? What if they were describing something else entirely? A psychological storm, a shared madness, or an encounter with something unnatural. A lesser-known theory suggests the men encountered a creature from the deep, an ancient sea serpent or some other colossal leviathan. Imagine the terror of seeing such a thing rise from the waves. It could certainly explain why a hardened man like Donald MacArthur would be reduced to weeping and praying. The mystery of what happened to the keepers is only half the story. The other half belongs to the men who had to replace them. For Joseph Moore, the horror didn't end with his discovery. After sending his report back with the Hesperus, he was left on Eilean Mor to man the light, along with 3 other volunteer sailors. The lighthouse was no longer a workplace. It was a tomb. For nearly a month, those 4 men endured what they would later describe as a living nightmare. They were reportedly so terrified that they never allowed themselves to be alone, huddling together in the kitchen for meals and sleeping in the same room. They spoke in whispers, starting at every creak of the tower and every moan of the wind. The silence left behind by the vanished keepers became a suffocating presence, a psychological poison that seeped into the very stone of the building. This terror did not leave with Joseph Moore. In the years that followed, the Eilean Mor posting became the most dreaded in the entire Scottish lighthouse service. Keepers who were stationed there reported an unbearable sense of being watched. They spoke of a strange, lingering sorrow that clung to the air. Legends began to grow, passed from one keeper to the next. Some claimed that on the wind they could hear a voice, or voices wailing in the gale. One keeper, a man named Walter Aldebert, who served on the rock decades after the event, was said to have heard a voice calling the names of the dead men. Marshall, Ducat, MacArthur, carried on the salt spray during a storm. Whether these were tricks of the mind, frayed nerves in an impossibly isolated place, or something more, they created an undeniable legacy. The post saw an unusually high turnover of staff, with many keepers requesting transfers after only a short time, unable to bear the oppressive atmosphere of the silent tower and its unending lonely watch. In 1971, the Eilean Mor Lighthouse was automated. It no longer needs keepers. The island was abandoned to the seabirds and the wind. The mystery has never been solved. No bodies were ever recovered from the sea. The disappearance of Thomas Marshall, James Ducat, and Donald MacArthur remains absolute.